All right. Today I'm going to talk to you about using the Dado Blade and the table saw. The Dado Blade is just a special blade used in a normal table saw. And we use the Dado Blade, which actually consists of several blades. We use the Dado Blade to make dado joints, rabbet joints, box joints, finger joints, lap joints. So the first thing is to show you just how you set up the Dado Blade for what you want to do, okay? So first things first, as always, make sure your power is disconnected before you start putting your fingers in there around the blade, okay? So what we're going to do, we want to make a groove. Like a dado joint is a three-sided groove that you put in the piece of wood that another piece of wood fits into, okay? You've got to match the width of that groove to the thickness of the piece that's going in the groove. In this case, we're using 3/4 red oak plywood, okay? So I've already determined that we need to add some width to our dado stack, our dado blade, to match up with this. Okay, so we've got power disconnected, got the wrenches that only use on this table saw. Okay, I'm holding the shaft with one wrench, and then on the other, and this. Is a reverse thread on this arbor. You don't want to drop this down inside if you can help it. Okay, so I'm going to take this dado stack apart so you can see what it consists of. Okay, so this is one of your outside blades, and this particular outside blade, as I'm looking at it, it's the left side blade. Okay, you always want to keep the writing to the outside, and also you can see like the tilt on that tooth, it tilts down to the inside. You always want to keep the high side on the outside, okay? So that's one of your outside blades. I'm going to lay it there face down. And then, looks like we had a shim in here. I'll set that over there. I'll show it to you here in a second. And here's another. Now this is a chipper blade, okay? And it's either usually a 2-bladed or a 4-bladed affair here. This one has 2, okay? So, okay, so we did have some shims in there already, and it looks like 3 chippers on the inside. Okay. Okay, and then there's our right side outside blade. Okay. This side out says right there. Isn't that handy? Okay. So the best way to set up the width of your dado to match the thickness of your material, okay, is to lay your material on a known flat surface, and the best surface is the surface of the table saw. Nice, straight, flat, cast iron table, okay? I'm going to set the dado stack next to it, okay? And then I'm going to line these up. And you want to line these up so the hole's lined up in the center, but you never want to line the teeth up, okay? You see I've got the tooth of the chipper between the teeth on the outside blade, okay? And also all the teeth are pointing the same direction. The teeth are going to point towards you coming over the top of the circulation, okay? So now we're going to alternate, so we don't want to line these up. This one, okay, fan that out like a deck of cards. All right, let's do this. Okay. And then another one. All right. Now, we know we're going to have to add some shims here to match this thickness. So I'm just going to put this stack in with no shims so you can see where we're at. Make sure I got my teeth the right direction. That is correct. Make sure I don't have any teeth lined up. Okay. There. So that's quite a little bit thinner than the actual piece right now. We need to add some shims, okay? That's what we're going to do. I'm going to start with a pretty thick one, and this is what a shim is, and they have different thicknesses here. I have all these different shims, you know, that came with this Dado set or another, and I kept them. All right, so let's just quit beating around the bush here. Let's just start with two thick ones and see if that's too much, okay? That is actually just barely thinner. I actually used the two thickest shims that I have. It's barely thinner than the piece of plywood. So I'm going to add another shim that I think is about the right thickness. I don't think this is going to be enough, but we're going to try it. And you want the piece to fit in the groove, but you don't want to have to pound it in. And you also don't want it sloppy. Man, that is close. I still think it's a little bit thinner. So we're going to add, let's add this one. No. Let's add this one. Okay, and because the idea behind this is a dado joint adds a lot of shear strength to your project, but also in a glue joint, like in a dado joint, it's all glue, it's all wooden glue. There's no fasteners, okay? And what you're doing is you're increasing your wood to wood area in that glue joint, okay? So it's a very strong joint. That feels pretty good. So we're going to put the dado stack together with these shims in place, but I'm not going to stack all the shims up in one spot. I'm going to spread them out throughout the stack. Okay, so here's my stack of shims. Here's my chippers. So I'm going to start with my right side outside blade, and I'm going to add a shim. Okay. Now a chipper, oops, look at that. What not to do. Had my teeth pointing the wrong way. I grabbed the wrong outside blade. You want the teeth facing towards you, coming over the top. Okay, outside blade, shim. Okay, chipper. Always pay attention to your teeth direction here. Okay, and remember, you don't want to line these teeth up. You want them offset like so, or you'll put this in a bind. Okay, another shim, another chipper. Another shim. Actually, another chipper. There we go. Okay. One more little shim. That's a pretty thin one. That's what I need to get my thickness. And we might make our cut and find out we need to make an adjustment here on our stack. So we'll see. Okay, everything is fitting together like it should, no binding. You always want to check that before you tighten down. Okay, so there's that. Okay. Okay, that's finger tight. Now we're going to hold this so it doesn't move. Tighten this. Doesn't need to be insanely, freakishly super tight. Just tighten it. Okay. Now, depending on the width of your stack, you need to pick the right insert or throat plates. Okay, and so I've got several different widths that we've actually made for different stacks. Okay, and you want the one that's going to most closely fit your blade without interfering with the blade, and that would be this one. Okay, now to make, okay, I'm ready to plug in power. Okay, and I'm going to have to back this camera up a little bit. All right. So if I'm making a groove dado cut parallel with the long axis of the board, I want to use a fence just like I would on the table saw. If I'm going across the long axis of the wood with a groove or dado, then I want to use what I call my dado sled, okay? And that's something, I've never really found one I liked. I made my own. It's difficult to guard a dado cut because it's not a through cut. So we can't use the splitter, the anti-kickback fingers, and the overhead guard that we do with our normal table saw. And this is just a miter sled that I've made that I can push that through the cut. Okay? So we're going to make a test cut here and see what it looks like. Okay, this is a test cut that I made before we started, and I knew it was too thin, too narrow, so we'll disregard that. That was my initial run here, okay? So one more thing we haven't talked about, depth, the depth of this dado. Okay, typically you want to go halfway through the thickness of the wood. This is 3/4 inch plywood, so we want to go 3/8 of an inch deep. Right here, I've got a depth gauge, okay? And on that, I do have a 3/8 setting, and I'm going to use that right there. I'm going to use that to set my depth. Okay, it's pretty good. Takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. Okay, so to use this, I'm putting pressure down and on the piece of plywood, but also forward on the sled at the same time to make a nice even bottom cut. Here we go. Okay, we're going to test our cut. That's how it should fit. Perfect. Okay, fits in there perfect. I don't have to force it. I don't really have any extra wiggle room. That will be an excellent mechanical joint right there. When we glue that, we'll get glue on all three sides here. and that'll be a strong joint. That's how you set up a dado blade.